All right. Yeah. If you're wondering who is this Nazarite talking with this American, that's basically the difference about with Canada and America right now with COVID-19 is that I have no haircut. He's got pretty decent hairdo, and that is because of COVID-19. Anyway, Eric Cunningham, uh, editor at large of Elections Daily, is it?
Editor in chief.
Editor in
Founder and
chief.
editor in chief.
Anyway, welcome back to the show, Eric.
Yeah, happy to be on.
Anyway, I want to start off with, as I always do with my guests, with stuff in your home state. In North Carolina, I remember you were hyping Mark Walker in terms of a Senate run, and now he seems to be like in third place in the polling, practically. And yeah, go ahead.
His main problem, which I thought he had good messaging, he was running an effective message. The problem is what it always was with him is he has no name ID. No one knows who he is. He is kind of stuck in this weird position where at first it looked like trying to triangulate between the established, the more Trump conservative lane, and also between like an establishment sort of guy who's reaching out to minority voters. Seemed like that could work. The problem is he's not. I could go into it a little bit, but he's from Greensboro. I made a map of it. I have to find it basically of where the Republican vote is in the state. He's not in a bad area, but you'd much rather be in Charlotte in terms of where it is. McCrory being in the race now gives him a very, very good position because of how large the Charlotte metropolitan area is and how many Republican voters there are there. People tend to forget that at large, the metropolitan area of Charlotte is still Republican. If you look at how the metropolitan area votes, I think even if you exclude South Carolina, it still votes for Republicans. And there's a lot of Republican voters there.
This is not just Mecklenburg County.
It's not just Mecklenburg. It's Cabarrus, Union, Iredell, Lincoln, Gaston. And then if you go into South Carolina, I think there's Lancaster County. And then I think there's another, it's not another Union County, but it's another county that's right at the tip of Charlotte, like where Fort Mill is. So there's a lot of Republicans there. Piedmont as well. I'm gonna go ahead and try to find it because I think it's a useful. Yeah, like basically the problem with Mark Walker's campaign right now is the low name ID. He's running in a lane that's kind of mixed. North Carolina, surprisingly, isn't that Trumpy of a state. It voted for Trump, but in terms of where voters are, and in terms of the positioning, the voters are more movement conservative sort of people than Trump conservatives, if that makes sense.
If you look at how like Arizona, where there are just Trumpy Republicans, it's probably the most Trumpian Republican state, party in the state.
Yeah, right? We're not that Trumpy in terms of what we're looking for. You don't have a lot of like super duper populist people here. There are people who voted for Trump because they liked him, but much less so than like in states like Georgia or Florida, if you looked at the polling. And so right off the bat, he's trying to do that while the threat of a Laura Trump run seems to have evaporated. They just purchased a new home in Florida, which, again, I don't want to laugh at them. I genuinely did not think she was going to run because she has 2 kids under the age of 5. By all accounts, she seems like a genuine sort of family person who cares about her family, not someone who would want to spend a year and a half on the road, which is what this entails. It involves either being Pat McCrory, you have the name ID, you have the money, you have the radio show. Like, he has a big base already. Walker has to spend all year barnstorming across the state to raise money, which he's not doing very good at. Going to county Republican meetings, going from city to city to city, all over the place, trying to get his name up. Laura Trump has name, but she didn't have it. So I'm not surprised at that. But overall, the biggest issue for Walker is McCrory. The regions they're going to be competing at in the state, which is the majority of the state in the primary, it's basically they're in a similar area, except McCrory has the larger portion, and Walker is from an area which has a lot of Republicans, but he's also having to compete with Ted Budd now.
Right. And in terms of, I was going to say, in terms of metropolitan areas, correct me if I'm wrong, I just assumed that there was the Charlotte Metro line. I think it's called the Metro line.
Yeah,
which is,
that's a comment. That's a term that's used. Yeah.
yeah, which is like 2.7 million. There's a Research Triangle, which is also, I think, 2.7 million. And
Yeah.
then there's Piedmont Triad, which is 1.7 million.
Yeah. Piedmont Triad is also a Republican leaning metro, although Forsyth and Guilford counties are both blue now. It's mainly that because the counties above it and below it, like Randolph and Davidson, are, I kid you not, 70% Trump counties and just continuing to get redder.
Yeah, but even in Guilford, city of High Point, I think, is also Republican.
It has a Republican mayor, but it's a Democratic. It's like about a Biden plus 10 city, which is not a whole lot, all things considered. It's really not a big deal in terms of areas. But so basically, he's trying to appeal to Eastern voters. East is actually going to matter a lot. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to find this map because I think it's a really, really good indication of what this area.
Walker's trying to appeal to Eastern voters.
Yeah, he's trying to appeal to minority voters. And the problem with that is minority voters generally aren't registered Republican, they're registered Democrat.
Right.
If they're registered unaffiliated, or that's fine, they can vote in the Republican primary. But if you're a registered Democrat, you have to vote in the Democratic primary. That's a problem when you're trying to reach out to Black voters. That's a general election a pitch. Oh, here it is. I just found it. So
and okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's a general election pitch, right? He went right out of the gate with a general election pitch that I am reaching out to minority voters. And to his credit, he has the credit. He got a lot of attention and support from the Black community for supporting historically Black colleges and universities. Guilford County has several of those. That's a big deal there. That is genuinely a big deal. That's a general election message. That's not a primary message.
Right.
So, can you enable screen sharing so I can?
Yeah, just give me a second and go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the vaunted map I was talking about here. This is the what I'd call what we're looking at. So can you see it correctly?
Yeah, I can see it.
So this is the percentage of the statewide vote in the last presidential primary, how it went. I would expect these numbers to be fairly similar. Registration numbers are increasing in some of these areas, but it's not a whole lot. So where McCrory is from is the Charlotte area. And I would point at it, but you notice whenever I pull my pointer up here, it puts the text up over. So it's the red one, the dark red one. Charlotte's 20% of primary votes, Republican primary votes. That's a lot of votes. And if anything, I'm kind of undercounting. You could arguably say Catawba is also tied with the Charlotte area to some degree because we're in the media market. The actual Charlotte media market extends all the way up to Watauga. So even further, it goes up to there. So these are your business voters in Mecklenburg County, suburban moderates, and also movement conservatives, people. So these are people, McCrory gets a good start here because not only was he the mayor of Charlotte, he's known in the area and he was fairly popular, all things considered. Walker's from the Triad. Triad is 17% of primary voters. And it's pretty good. The problem is, again, Ted Budd is running. Ted Budd is not going to win the nomination. His run is a suicide run. But they were literally in adjacent congressional districts. Back when they were gerrymandered, Walker had Guilford, I think Randolph, and another one, and then he basically had half of Greensboro, and Budd had the other half. Now Budd's seat stretches from Davie all the way up to like Chatham County, Person, a couple areas around there. So he's competing for that 16%. What are the other areas that are important? The Piedmont. That's another one that's actually competitive. Although it's called the Piedmont, you would think it's tied with the Triad. It's not. It's more Charlotte media market. McCrory could also do pretty well here. McCrory did pretty well here in primaries. These are your movement conservative voters. There's lots of conservatives here, and it punches way above its weight in GOP primaries. Aside from Watauga, these are about 60 to 70% Republican counties, and a lot of them, and they vote fairly often. Appalachia will also matter to a lesser extent. Again, there's more Democratic voters. There's a lot of unaffiliated voters, actually, in Appalachia. I believe Buncombe, Henderson, Transylvania, Madison, and Haywood, if I recall right, all have a plurality of unaffiliated voters. That's a pretty diverse group, and they can vote in any primary they want.
And Appalachia is interesting because it was Democratic in our lifetimes, but I think that it was Unionist during the Civil War.
Yes, it was before it became Democratic around the New Deal time. It was a Republican stronghold. These were Republican areas, and I actually have a map of how North Carolina voted on secession that I could show, give you an idea of that if you wanted. But that's like the western portion of the state. So you add up those numbers. That's about, between the Triad and Charlotte, that's about what, 37%. add another 17%, or actually add another 19% for Piedmont Appalachia, you're already up to around 50% of the vote before even hitting the East. The triangle, that's going to be McCrory's stronghold. You may wonder, why am I saying it's so liberal? Keep in mind, there's a lot of unaffiliated voters in that area, but also these counties voted heavily for Ted Cruz. Orange, Durham, and Wake, I believe, all went for Ted Cruz because they're not Trumpy counties. Stuff like Granville, maybe, that's a little bit more in his wheelhouse, but that's another area McCrory starts off with. So the rest of the state, the Trump area, the eastern portion of the state, Northeast, Crystal Coast, and Sand Hills. Northeast is your Democratic voters, historically Democratic area, where you call your Jesse-crats, who voted for Jesse Helms, so he was like their gateway drug into the Republican Party. And I don't mean that as a joke. He literally was their gateway drug into the Republican Party,
Right.
aside from Barry Goldwater. Crystal Coast is like a mix of college graduates from New Hanover, boomers, and pig farmers. And then the Sand Hills is, of course, the Trumpiest portion of the state. Like these are the only areas in the state where Trump outperformed Steve Troxler, who was the #1 performer in the state.
Yeah.
So basically, McCrory, I think, has a really, really good start here. Bud and Walker are basically competing for the same electorate, which is more Trump-friendly establishment or more Trump-friendly movement conservatives, whereas McCrory is basically like the Republican. He had, people think about him for HB2. That wasn't on him, but it was also, that was a legislative. He was pretty popular. He was actually has residual appeal in the East, believe it or not.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that despite the fact that the eastern part of North Carolina, I think, is more traditionally Democratic, McCrory actually outran Trump in that area.
Yeah. He didn't just outperform Trump. He actually ran well ahead. He was the top performing Republican in several counties in eastern North Carolina while he lost. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about. And just as another fun thing, because I mentioned it, this is the map on North Carolina's secession vote. And if you'll notice any familiarities right here, notice the Piedmont right here. These are the Republican stronghold areas. They've been Republican since before the Civil War. Some of these counties have Yadkin has literally never voted for a Democrat at the presidential level.
Yeesh, Appalachia's looking pretty blue there.
Yeah, again, but keep in mind, there's a separate map here that I have, which is, this is basically, yes vote was, yes, we want a convention on secession. But most of those counties that I mentioned there actually voted to not secede. This is before Fort Sumter. When Fort Sumter happened, obviously, there was a mix of basically Unionists who kind of realized the inevitable and tried to make it as painless as possible, and also people who were just kind of resigned to the fact that everyone else around them had seceded. It was kind of unfortunate, but you'll notice right here, only a couple of those counties actually voted for secession delegates. So they voted for, and this is actually marked on the ballot. I didn't say union and disunion facetiously here. It was marked on the ballot as, do you want union delegates or disunion delegates?
Wow.
And yeah, again, somewhere around a third of North Carolinians didn't actually want to secede. And that's a minimum from what we were looking at. But again, these are the areas, the Republican areas have been Republican for basically forever. And so the long and short of it is, as of right now, I see Pat McCrory as the prohibitive favorite for the Senate candidacy. There could be other Republicans that jump in, but right now it looks like a 3-horse race between McCrory, Bud, and Walker. Bud and Walker both have low name ID. McCrory not only has the conservative sword, he's known out east, he's known in the west. It's even if you had Laura Trump in, I think McCrory could be the favorite. But keep in mind, you only need 30% to avoid a runoff in a primary here in the state.
And even if not, they have to request it.
Yes, so even if somehow the winner of this race got less than 30%, the second place has to request specifically to have a runoff, which does not always happen, because a lot of the times the person in second place realizes they're going to lose and would rather graciously accept defeat than have the humiliation of losing in a runoff. And I mean graciously, I mean seriously. They look at the option like, do I want to lose or do I want to unify and go ahead rather than wait a couple months for a runoff? So that's the long and short of like that situation in particular, where I do think McCrory has a sizable advantage in basically every regard right now. I need to see his fundraising though. His fundraising is going to be important. specifically.
Well, this is certainly a far cry from 5 months ago, I have to say.
Well, Walker was the only candidate that had announced at that point. There didn't seem to be any other people itching to run. One other factor I'll also mention is that Tom Tillis utterly loathes Mark Walker and will never endorse him. He again, this is because Mark Walker considered primarying Tom Tillis openly, publicly, floated polls. He actually commissioned poll to do that. And Tom Tillis was understandably irritated by that because it's stupid to primary an incumbent senator in a swing state. So that will never happen. He'll never endorse him in a primary. He'll easily go to bat for McCrory if that's the case.
And how's the Democratic primary looking?
For all the election Twitter hype about Jeff Jackson, he's basically gone nowhere. I would think honestly, out of the candidates right now, there's three of them. There's Sherry Beasley, the former Supreme Court justice, who is most known for attempting to steal an election after the fact. And again, just a quick rundown of that. She lost the election by under 1,000 votes and requested a recount, which is fine. She requested a recount. They recounted. She was still down. So what did she decide to do? Well, Democrats control all 100 county boards of elections, plus the state board of election. So she had a brilliant idea. There's a bunch of ballots that were just thrown out for not being valid. Let's just appeal all of the Democratic ballots we can, and voila, we'll win because we have 3-2 Democratic commissions.
Democrats still control all the county boards of elections?
This is because the governor's party appoints the tiebreaker. This is why I hate 5-member commissions. Thankfully, the boards of elections, none of them took up her request because it was egregiously terrible. The News and Observer, Charlotte Observer, were all ridiculing her for this because it was honestly a sad and pathetic move. And I say this as someone who loathed the election theft that Trump tried to attempt. This is equally as bad. It's trying to abuse a structure that's in place to get ballots counted, but it was so transparently terrible that it was rejected. So that's one of the candidates there.
If you're noticing something showing up on my screen right now,
amazing ad. I love this ad. Let's show your viewers this ad because it's incredible. It's so catchy.
Yes.
He's run this for 8 years.
Wait.
There's a judge they call Paul Newby. He's got criminals on the run. Paul Steely stares, got them running scared, and he'll take them down one by one. Paul Newby, he's a tough old judge.
I hate this.
Respected everywhere. He's heard the call to lay down the law to bring justice tough but fair. Paul Newby, justice tough but fair. Paul Newby, criminals best beware. A federal prosecutor for 20 years, bringing justice tough but fair. So walk the line or you'll do hard time. Criminals best beware.
Now, if you're wondering, the North Carolina Supreme Court has nothing to do with civil criminal procedure. This is what he was running for. But to give him credit, he was a key part of getting North Carolina's North Carolina's original copy of the Bill of Rights back. I'm going to do a tangent here because this is just a ridiculous story. So during the Civil War, Union soldiers ransacked the Capitol. This was normal. That happens. It's not it usually is taking a souvenir. It's like the insurrection, except it's legitimate and kind of understood because, North Carolina lost the war. And so one of the Union soldiers just happened to find North Carolina's original copy of the Bill of Rights, and he stole it. And he took it home and he put it in a broom closet and forgot about it. One of his descendants found it and was like, hey, this is probably worth some money. Tried to go to the state of North Carolina and sell it, or actually tried to go to sell it. So this did not work. They tried to do it for multiple years. I think it was decades. So decades after the fact, in like the 2000s, again, these people pop up and they're trying to sell it to a museum in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania comes to North Carolina and is like, hey, we found your original copy of the Bill of Rights. If you help us buy it, we'll let you have it on loan from our museum, like 2 months out of a year or so. And, North Carolina was like, great, we'll consider it. And then we called the FBI and we're like, hey, they have our copy of the Declaration or the Bill of Rights. And they got it back in a sting and it's back in our capital, and Pennsylvania does not have it because screw you, Pennsylvania. That's our copy of the Bill of Rights. Newby led that. So that's like he actually has a background there. So he's a fun character, but that was who Sherry Beasley lost to. Closest statewide race in years. She could have lost gracefully and she chose not to. She chose the low path. The next candidate of the three who are major is Erica Smith. Erica Smith is a progressive state senator, former state senator who ran against Cal Cunningham in the last election. She managed to pull about 37% of the vote. Republicans actually advertised on her behalf, basically trolling voters into voting for her. But the majority white Democratic electorate voted for Cal Cunningham over her. But 37% was still pretty embarrassing for a primary performance. She's back again for round two. And Democrats like her even less because she actually endorsed the Republican challenger to Jeff Jackson. For some reason, she's a black woman, the one who was running against Jeff Jackson, so it could be that. They're not fond of her, but she's polling about as well as Jeff Jackson. And then finally, you have Jeff Jackson, who was a no-name state senator who ran the furthest behind the top of the ticket of any Mecklenburg County state senator in a district that was drawn for him. He's most notable for appearing on Reddit and for wanting to abolish the filibuster. So, and also for being a generic white male lawyer after Democrats have lost election after election after election after nominating generic white male lawyers, or to be fair to Deborah Ross, white female lawyers.
Or to be fair to Jenna Wadsworth, white female farmers.
Yes, exactly. Generally speaking, I don't think nominating people of color is necessarily a placenta for the Democratic Party here, but it is. That's the field right now. So
it's worked for Democrats in Georgia.
Yeah, well, North Carolina is not Georgia. We're substantially more rural. There's a far smaller African-American population that is substantially less liberal than in Georgia. There's no defined urban center. There's no large metropolitan area in the center of the state. Our big urban county is about the size of Gwinnett. Our big urban counties are about as large as Cobb County in Georgia, which is a suburban county, to give you an idea of how ridiculous, like, urban here, like we don't even have direct suburban counties. Like Union County is more of an exurb than anything.
I asked 2 months ago whether or not Union County was showing any signs of eventually Cobbifying or Gwinnettizing, and that is not the case.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing to look at again is it doesn't have the high income level. I looked at the townships. So if you have townships here, this is an invention of Yankee carpetbaggers, and I love them for it because one, their constitution was incredible. Paul Newby loves it as well. But you can also see the growth out from Charlotte. You see like Cabarrus is starting to shift a little bit. Concord.
Yeah, Cabarrus saw a big shift.
Yeah, it's got the affluent ones. Union's got really, really wealthy folk right here. Really, really, really wealthy folk. But the rest of it's pretty like normal. Like you're not seeing the outgrowth you saw in those other areas. So I didn't make one for the Democratic primary electorate because it's pretty boring. Basically boils down to, do black voters consolidate around a candidate, which it could be a possible no, because while Sherry Beasley is a former statewide officer, Erica Smith is a state senator and is known in the northeastern corner of the state, which has a lot of African-American voters. Jeff Jackson will probably get a lot of votes from Mecklenburg in that area. But I mean, in reality, in a three-way race, I would probably rather be Sherry Beasley, but she's not a great candidate. I don't think McCrory is an amazing candidate either. But if we have like two B-tier candidates, I'd say Beasley is more of a C-tier. In a Republican midterm favored year, in all likelihood, in North Carolina, which is a state that has not only voted for two Democrats at the federal level this century, I'd rather be the Republicans. But that's the Democratic side there.
But okay, so I mean, let's go macro and then back to micro. No offense to North Carolina, but comparison to the country, it is micro.
Yes, it is. So we're the ninth largest state now. We're ahead of I think we're ahead of Michigan now at least. So.
Yeah. Do you think that I mean it's probably going to be like a Republican year, but like the question is, how Republican is it going to be? I mean, if we're not seeing, I don't think I'm seeing yet the signs of a red wave developing just yet. I mean, because Biden's still popular, but on the other side though, that doesn't necessarily translate to Democrats down ballot.
Yeah.
But
I think the general baseline is he needs to have around a 54% approval rating going into the midterm election to have like a chance at not sucking. Like the problem with midterms here is the trend is consistent, and it's basically, aside from 9/11 and a couple of other flukes around wars, the party in power always loses seats in the House. Almost always, except in 98 and 2002. Those are the two recent ones. 98 was impeachment, and the economy was doing incredible, like absolutely off the charts.
Clinton was 70% approval.
Yeah. If Clinton, like if Ross Perot wasn't a thing, He would have probably hit around 55 to 60% of the vote, presidential level, on par with a Reagan landslide. He got 50% of the vote in a three-way race, which is pretty impressive. And that was in 96. So 98 was just like amazing economy. You have the digital economy. You have the impeachment stuff that people thought was unwarranted. And then 2002 was 9/11. And even then, the party still didn't necessarily gain or lose seats in every area. There was some really weird results in those elections.
Yeah, Mark Pryor unseated Tim Hutchinson in Arkansas.
Yeah, you had all sorts of bizarre results to say, especially at the gubernatorial level. So,
you say weird. A Republican got elected governor of Hawaii that year.
Yes, and also Republicans in Maine. The map of Maine is literally the opposite of what it is today, where Republicans won the southern counties around Portland and Democrats won the northern congressional district. So, like, that's the level we're talking about. But, like, short of Biden being very, very popular and an amazing economy, neither of which seems like is going to happen, to be honest. You're working up against history.
Right.
You're also working up against Republicans controlling gerrymandering or controlling legislatures, even if it's not gerrymandering. Arizona is a big one. I say the current map is a Democratic gerrymander. If it's redrawn, and it seems like it's going to be the case, one of those seats that favored Democrats by a little bit more than the state's lean probably goes closer to the state lean or a little bit to the right. I'm mainly thinking of the first, which is the rural northern congressional district, would be the one that would be more likely to be Republican.
I mean, under a fair map, that seat would basically be a swing seat.
It'd be a red seat. It'd be a mildly red seat, probably 5 to 10 points. That's one seat just off the top of it from these other ones. You're not even looking at other states like North Carolina, other states along that line, and you're looking at gains. You're looking at where Republicans did better. South Texas, even without gerrymandering in South Texas, Republicans pretty much pick up a seat there by default. Like, it's such a challenging environment. The Senate is where Democrats can actually hold their own.
Yeah,
but not because of Ohio or some of these other nonsense.
I'm thinking Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, possibly Pennsylvania is where
Wisconsin. They said the swing. Yeah, you're right. The swing states will be. These are the direct swing states. New Hampshire, if Sununu runs, it looks like he will. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. North Carolina and Florida are Ohio and Missouri are like in the tier that maybe one of them could be competitive.
I think North Carolina, and possibly, probably not though, but possibly Florida is in a closer tier than that.
Yeah, it's like if like the top ones are like the top tier targets for both parties, North Carolina is going to be expensive, but I actually don't think it'll be as expensive as usual. It's mainly going to be going to like places like New Mexico or New Hampshire and Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, those sorts of places. Florida is, again, it's another joke tier really for Democrats. Ohio and Missouri. The problem is Republicans don't have a lot of targets, and the targets they do have, they don't really have candidates for. Putting that aside, the House is a complete other situation.
Right.
Democrats, again, a swing of just 1 or 2 points would have been sufficient to flip the House.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm wondering is, whether we could see a situation next year where Republicans do flip the House, but they're relying heavily on redistricting to do that.
That's possible. But I think there's also the factor of the midterm factor. I don't think this will necessarily is 100% guaranteed to be a red wave. I do think we'll get at least a red tide. If it is a red wave, not only are you looking at seats because of gerrymandering, you're also looking at seats that are just genuine stunners, that are just nobody expects to be competitive. Those are your Oklahoma, the equivalent of an Oklahoma 5. If Democrats get too aggressive in upstate New York, you could see a couple of seats flip. Like if they just decide, we're going to string Erie to Rochester and then have one seat. So we're going to have a string mander of Erie to Rochester. Then have one seat in Erie, one seat in Rochester. The Erie to Rochester string would probably be fine. It's those other two, because the Rochester seat actually almost flipped in 2014.
Because that was low Democratic turnout.
Yeah, so like at that point, at those sorts of waves, they look really weird. We also have no clue what California is going to do. No clue what Michigan is going to do. Those are really big question marks. I do think if the election's held right now, I'm not sure who's favored. I do think that Biden is, if you look at the polls, I'm not an unskew the polls sort of guy, but I also don't think running polls with D plus 17 party affiliations to get a D+10. Approval is necessarily the wisest idea. That seems a little bit not great.
Right. On the other hand, I sometimes joke that whenever I see a Trafalgar poll or a Rasmussen poll with Trump with Biden up 2, I jokingly say, well, I wonder how well he's really doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, Trafalgar was closer than Quinnipiac or anyone else. Now, people will say that it's because they skew their polls to like a couple points more Republican than normal, and that could be the case. I don't know their methodology. I will say they were closer, certainly closer in 2020 than a lot of these legitimate polling firms. So I don't know who that speaks worse of.
Right. I'll just say I think, at least just not to rehash 2020, I just think that state by state, you actually have differences in terms of quality polls. Florida was off, but I think Georgia was actually quite accurate.
Yeah, North Carolina is horrendous. North Carolina is really, their polling was just atrocious. We're talking polls that had Roy Cooper up 20. He won by 4. You had polls with Cunningham up by 10. He lost by 2 and only won 46.9% of the vote, which is horrendously terrible for Democratic candidates.
Maine was a fustercluck.
Yeah. Oh, Maine was. Susan Collins didn't lead a single poll the whole campaign.
Jared Golden was up 20 in one poll.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing with Maine, which was crazy, was that Democrats were spending in their last minute. That should have been a pretty transparent clue that, hey, maybe they knew something was going on in Maine, because there's no reason for them to spend there in the last minute other than that. Same as New Mexico. They had New Mexico spends last minute.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting result. I think on the whole, down ballot Republicans did better than expected, I think is what happened.
Oh, yeah. So basically my gist of that to the House is Republicans can't rely on gerrymandering to save them. And I think the gerrymandering thing is kind of underrated. Like, we know what they're going to get rid of. They're going to probably get rid of Yarmouth in Kentucky because they don't like him. Get rid of Cooper. Yeah, no, Cleaver's fine. Cleaver is absolutely fine.
Oh, you don't think they're going to crack Kansas City?
No, they love Cleaver. No, so the weird thing with them, Missouri does not want to gerrymander. They don't they'll gerrymander to break their incumbents, but they actually like Cleaver and have no interest in drawing him out. That's from everything I've read from people I've talked to. They like how he's like a mediator between some of the more moderate, white Republicans and black Democrats. They like him as a moderate sort of figure, especially compared to Cori Bush.
Right. I mean, I just assumed that there's the fact that they would draw a 7-to-1 map because they can draw a 7-to-1 map.
Yeah, they like him.
And second, there's a worry that what happened to Lacey Clay could happen to Emmanuel Cleaver, and you could get a second Cori Bush.
There's if that's the case, they will do it, but there's no real risk of that. He's popular. The reason now, Jim Cooper, he'll be drawn out in Tennessee. Tennessee Republicans actually really like Jim Cooper. The problem is he almost lost to a DSA candidate in 2020, and they're not going to let that chance happen again this time.
Yeah.
So
James Mackler, who was supposed to challenge Bill Haggerty, he ended up losing to Marquito Bradshaw.
Yeah. So Nashville gets cracked for, but we know where these are coming from. We also know where Democrats are going to gerrymander. New York, Illinois, maybe Oregon, maybe Washington.
I think Oregon's less likely because of that deal they struck.
Yeah. It's an interesting that's a discussion for another thing. But we know the ones that they control, and I think California, for that matter, the commission has a Democratic skew, or a liberal skew, I should say. I don't think we can count on that map to necessarily be 100% nonpartisan. Right. And that's a pretty big one. People will say, "Oh, it's just one state." Well, it's California. It's got 52 congressional seats.
Yeah. It was just with Oregon. I find it interesting because DeFazio and Schrader, their seats became marginal in most recent years. What I'm wondering is, if Oregon draws a second Republican seat, could those two incumbents be shored up?
Oh, absolutely. And we actually have a map on that at Elections Daily. Basically, what you would do is you would draw a rural seat. So you draw the second, pretty similar to what it is right now. And then you just instead of having the fourth go into Eugene, you'd have the fourth kind of duck into the Republican Valley seat, the Republican Valley counties, between basically the coast and the mountains, and take those up, and then you can easily draw a 4-to-2 map, which is not only proportionate but also pretty fair, and would keep DeFazio and Schrader safe. Although Schrader may be vulnerable in the primary, right? More so than a general.
Yeah, this is what I was saying to you. I think about why I asked if Oregon's fourth was a more Democratic version of North Carolina 11th, in the sense that the fact that you would have a Democrat as progressive as DeFazio representing a district that marginal, I think is a result of Lane County being where the Democrats are.
Yeah. Well, the biggest issue there is the college vote, but it was a marginal seat for Trump last time, but it was more competitive. It was
Yeah.
more
I
democratic
think
this time.
Clinton won it by 0.1.
Yeah, it was very, very close. But keep in mind, populism does apply to the left as well. There are a few left-wing populists that have held on more competitive seats, but it's more so his name ID and Republicans not having very good candidates. I mean, their candidate for 10 years or so was this guy called Art something, who was this kind of nutcase.
I'll look
And
him
then
up.
and then you had Alex Garlatos, who's a very credible candidate, is running again this time, who put a more competitive showing and did a little bit better. But yeah, the fourth is definitely an odd seat. They could fix it and they'll probably draw it a little bit. I think it might
Art
be
Robinson. Art Robinson.
Yeah, the fourth would probably be redrawn to go up to from Eugene to Salem. That'd be probably my bet if they were going to do that. I mean, again.
And what happens to the fifth is then what is the question, or Schrader's current seat?
Yeah, I mean, they could theoretically draw Portland out to the mountains, but one, I don't think Oregon Democrats are that aggressive. Believe it or not, there's actually fairly collegial relationships in Oregon and the legislature. Obviously there's disagreement over cap and trade. That's a very vehement discussion, and that walkouts, but otherwise, by all accounts, it seems to be a fairly not moderate, but they're not necessarily out to get rural Oregon per se.
Right. It's interesting.
In terms of protecting their incumbents, it makes more sense to draw a Republican seat to protect the rest of them rather than to risk that, because Oregon is not that democratic of a state. It's a pretty low floor for Democrats, but it's also pretty low ceiling.
Right. Although Oregon was I think carry +4 in 2000 and 2004. And also I would say a part of the reason why I'd say Oregon has gotten bluer in the past few years, I think it's helped by the fact that Salem is no longer the second largest city. Eugene is, and I think Eugene is just a lot more democratic than Salem is.
And it's suburban moderates. The moderates in Oregon actually place a pretty big emphasis on the environment. It also helps that the liberals in Oregon are the most liberal liberals in the country, and the conservatives are the most conservative conservatives.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's interesting that the parties, I guess, sort of have a collegial relationship. Just considering the fact that the Democrats, I think, are actually arguably more progressive than California Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, there's a faction of them, but leadership is what keeps that in line.
And Republicans nominated a QAnon candidate for Senate last year.
Yes, it's a weird. The legislature is a lot more reasonable, broadly speaking, than the two parties actually are.
And I'm sometimes wondering how long that will last.
Yeah, the Oregon GOP. I feel really bad for Eastern Oregon, because honestly, it's a different state. It really should be part of Idaho. If cap and trade happens, it will devastate their economy. I feel bad for them, but I mean, they're kind of stuck. So, I mean,
I'd say,
I can get why they'd be militant about it. I mean, because it is their livelihoods on the line.
Yeah, if they want to join Idaho, just let them.
Well, Oregon's not going to do that, because one, they would lose people, they would lose land, they would lose money. Even if they become more liberal, they lose a lot of things. It's never going to happen without an accompanying land swap or something.
Yeah, it ties in the whole debate. We could go on and on about this. It's tying into the whole debate about whether it should be one man or one vote in the state senates, which the Supreme Court has already said it has to be.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, but I've heard some grumbling about that.
Oh, I hate proportional. I am not a fan of proportional representation at all. So I am fine with that.
So you'd be fine with what we have in Ontario, where you have the smallest riding, which is 30,000 people, the largest being 120,000.
No. I think the ridings or the district should be the same size, roughly speaking. I actually think it's kind of ridiculous that there's a much broader standard for legislatures than Congress, because with Congress, it's within 1%. Usually, you only have one or two people off from the median ideal population number. Legislatures can be 5% one way, 5% the other. So if your seat can have 100, if the ideal seat is 100,000 people, it can have a low of 95,000 or a high of 105,000. That's our variation. And whereas in Congress, it would be a variation of 100,500 or 99,500. And usually it's more like one or two off of 100,000. They only really allow that variation in case of not having a county split.
Right, and I would, as you mentioned, like county splits, like if they're required, if you can't do that with while being equal, then you have to be equal and not have county splits.
Yeah.
Or not have county splits.
Yeah. I prefer not splitting counties. When I draw maps, or when I draw legislative maps, I try to avoid as much as possible splitting up counties, especially state legislatures.
Yeah.
Because that is important. Like if you're a rural county, you get split in half. Neither representative is probably going to care about you that much.
Right. We were talking, one place that does not necessarily have, certainly does not have one man, one vote is state Supreme Courts, like the one in Illinois.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what's about Illinois Supreme Court?
Oh, I mean, I get the Democratic complaint about it being malapportioned. I also think if a Republican was doing the exact same thing Illinois Democrats are saying that is going to go on, Stephen Wolf will be on Twitter complaining about a Republican power grab. Basically, what happened in Illinois is Mike Madigan ran the state with an iron fist, and his favored court justices got on the Supreme Court, and they usually get reelected with no problem. There's 5 districts, 3 Supreme Court officers come from a Chicago-based district, and then the rest come from other districts, and those are apportioned in a way that they basically all favor Republicans, because they have to have no county splits. So they basically got rid of one Democratic justice in a Republican seat, and were preparing to run in 2022 another Republican justice in that point, and then the Republicans have a majority on the Supreme Court. What is their evil, nefarious goal? They just want fair maps. That's what they want. They want fair legislative and congressional maps. Illinois Democrats have systematically tried to eliminate the influence of downstate Illinois. I think it's honestly despicable. It's my least favorite form of governance. It's this idea that those people don't vote for me, so I'm not going to represent them. I'm not only not going to represent them, I'm going to go out of their way to ensure that their interests are ignored and that they have nothing to say about. I think that's just a horrible way to govern, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. Frankly, it's usually Democrats in big cities governing like that. So the evil Republican plan is to implement a more compact legislative and congressional map. Illinois Democrats don't want that to happen because not Republicans would have a chance to take over the legislature, but they'd go from a supermajority or super minority to having about 40% of seats in all likelihood and being able to compete for maybe another 5% in Chicagoland. Now, granted, the new districts, Republicans can still win those. They're only about Biden plus 5 and Biden plus 8, if I recall right. That's still winnable in a Republican midterm, but if any Republican state was doing what Illinois was doing here, Stephen Wolf would be very, very irritated. The Fair Maps Brigade would be very, very irritated. And I find it kind of a bit laughable that people on Twitter are cheering on gerrymandering in Democratic states as if not realizing what happened a decade before, which is that the reason Republicans drew gerrymanders in 2010 was not because of some evil, vile attempt like we're going to take back Congress. It was in response to Democratic gerrymanders. Republicans in North Carolina campaigned on independent commission. They were elected in a landslide, and they decided not to do it. And on paper, yeah, that's bad. But also the reason they decided not to do it is because Bev Perdue told them no. They offered a commission. She said no. And then the moment they won the election, she came up to them and basically said publicly, hey, how about that commission? Do you want a commission now? And they basically told her to stick it
pound dirt.
Yeah, to stick it where the sun don't shine. And I mean, like, yeah, is that petty? Yeah. Is it wrong? Yeah. Is it also understandable if you've been the minority party for 100 years in North Carolina, 100 years, the minority party, partially because of gerrymandering? Yeah, it becomes a bit more suitable. And this is the case in states like Georgia and Texas. States like that. So yes, Republicans did gerrymander there, but they did it in response to an after Democratic gerrymandering. So when Democrats were like, aha, you stupid idiots, we're just going to draw gerrymanders too. We're like, you already did draw gerrymanders. We have a memory longer than that of a goldfish. Like, we know it's not just us that did it. So I find it a bit hypocritical to be cheering on partisan gerrymanders while insisting that your party is not at fault here. It's the other party that's at fault. And if they stop gerrymandering, you'd stop gerrymandering too. Like, come on.
Let's turn that around. I mean, we talked about how it's important for there to be fair maps in Illinois, and I agree with you on that. But isn't it also important to have fair maps in Florida and Texas?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. And to a degree, Texas is going to have them. They have a whole county rule in the House. Democrats just sucked at winning districts. Now, Florida, yeah, Florida's going to get gerrymandered. That I don't like it, but that's what's going to happen. And also, keep in mind, Democrats think that any map that does not equally proportionately favor Democrats is a gerrymander. And when I say that, I don't mean that facetiously. That's the efficiency gap. That's literally what the efficiency gap is. It's comparing the percentage of the popular vote you got to the percentage of seats you got. And the problem with that is that it requires you to draw seats intentionally for party, where in states like North Carolina, if you just draw blindly by county and by not splitting cities, Republicans are probably favored to hold a 5 to 10 seat majority in the House in most elections.
And in Oklahoma, I was going to say in Oklahoma, for example, the most Democratic friendly map that I can think of is, the most Democratic friendly district still goes, I think, for Trump by like a point or half a point.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, these are gerrymanders, but I mean, when I look at this, I don't look at this from the perspective that it's just Democrats doing gerrymanders. I know it's both sides doing it. I'm just upset with people who insist that their side only does it because the other side does it, when that's a load of horse crap,
right?
To put it bluntly. Look at the New York map and tell me that's a fair congressional map, because it's not.
Yeah. I just think that especially when it comes to state legislative maps, I think there's just something untoward about state lawmakers drawing their own maps.
I actually don't have an issue with them doing it, and I actually prefer it to an independent commission. And I could go on a whole tangent about it. My problem with independent commissions, which I could if you want me to, but basically,
give me the brief version.
Yeah, so brief version. Basically, when you elect representatives, they make decisions and they're accountable to you, the voter. Also, statewide officials, those races cannot be gerrymandered. The governor, those officials are also accountable. Even in a gerrymander, you can elect a different governor if you really want to, if people are really outraged enough. Yeah, it's not great for them to be drawing it, but would I rather legislatures who I can vote out, or at least I can campaign against, do it, or an unaccountable bureaucrat? A council of unaccountable bureaucrats who are put in that position on a pedestal. They have all the authority. They have no legal mechanism to correct their mistakes. There's no legal mechanism to remove people that are genuinely having problems. And if the maps prove to be incorrect, you can't do anything to them. There's no accountability. And that's the problem I have, is there's no accountability. What I'd prefer is a set of standards in how districts are drawn. So rather than saying we need to take the ability to draw districts away from legislatures, which are who district drawing is assigned to in the Constitution or state constitutions, I would rather look at it, do like an Ohio level standard, make it a little bit clearer than theirs, but basically say, here is how you draw districts. If a county is big enough, I don't want to go too in depth, basically set a list of standards. If a city is this big, it can't be split. If a county doesn't have to be split, don't split it. Don't require people to not look at partisan affiliation or incumbent locations when drawing. All sorts of things. Require buy-in from the minority party. A 5-member commission, which I mentioned before, has problems, fails because it doesn't require minority buy-in. If you require maybe a third of the minority party to agree to the maps, or even if you just assign it to judges if it doesn't work, or you assign it to an algorithm. There's plenty of ways you can draw these districts that would be fair and proportionate to basically the idea of representing a geographical area. There's ways to do that are much better than having a group of, again, unelected bureaucrats who are either very knowledgeable insiders who know what they're doing, which has a set of problems associated with that, or people who have no idea what they're doing. They're just normal citizens, which sounds great until you realize most normal citizens don't know what it's like to be lobbied. Most normal citizens don't know how to tell a legitimate community interest group from a front group. Most organizations don't know what the difference between a legitimate community of interest and one that's dreamed up by a consultant somewhere. That happened in California. Yeah. Democrats, mainly specifically Democratic incumbents, created front groups to lobby for preferred district shapes. And the commission had good intentions. They didn't look at partisan affiliation at all. They turned that off. They did not look at it. They didn't look at incumbent residences, and they listened only to community groups. The problem was the community groups were often fronts for either political organizations or for candidates. So that's my problem with commissions. There's ways around that. Again, with the requiring a level of avoiding county splits, requiring compact shapes in districts, requiring community of interest, maybe create an idea of what that looks like, requiring the protection for VRA districts. All that stuff can be done legislatively as a guideline of what you need to do. And if you don't do this, the map is illegitimate and it can be struck down in court. That's a reasonable thing to do. It's much more reasonable than handing power to a bunch of people who, frankly, were never elected in the first place, which goes against our principle of American democracy. I know that's a little bit different in Canada. You have a wholly appointed Senate. You have an appointed governor general. You have a monarch. You technically have a state church.
Yeah,
that's different in Canada than here.
I was going to say, around the world, like the countries that do like independent commissions that draw the lines, it seems to work for them. It just the United States doesn't seem to be the only country where it doesn't seem to work.
We want democratic accountability, and I jokingly say that Canada is a liberal country that's very institutionally conservative. The United States is a conservative country that is very institutionally liberal.
Well, part of that is by accident. I'll be happy to go into that another time.
But again, like our design is we have power spread out among groups. Most offices are elected in some form or the other. It's very unusual for a powerful position, aside from judges. Judges are usually, federal judges are wholly appointed, but you need buy-in from both the executive and the legislative branch, whereas I think in Canada, they're just appointed by the prime minister, which is also really part of the legislature rather than a pure executive position. In states, most states elect judges. We elect even our judges. Like we want our local offices to be elected. I think the only exception I can think of as a recent innovation is the city manager, which is basically just taking authority. Like you have a mayor who does mayor stuff, you have a city council who does city stuff, and you have a city manager who does like city planning. Like that's like the biggest anti-democratic innovation we've had the last 120 years, aside from independent commissions. And it's so incredibly tame as a position that nobody really cares. But we usually like having the ability to confront our elected representatives and know that we can theoretically hold them accountable. You can never hold a commissioner accountable. You just can't.
Right. We're going to take a bit of a quick little break. When we come back, we're going to apply these redistricting principles to what's happening in North Carolina. See you in a bit. And we are back. So we were going to talk about redistricting. Certainly, we were going off talking about the whole redistricting spiel that you were going on. Let's talk about North Carolina specifically, because there's going to be an interesting map that's happening. Is it going to be more like a 10-4 or 9-5?
That's the question, right? So I have done redistricting scenarios, and I can dig through and see see if I can find some of what I've done. But the big gist for Republicans, I don't think they're going to do 6. I don't think it'll be 8-6. The problem basically for Republicans is, again, when I showed you the map of where the Republican voters were, northwestern portion of the state, right? So the problem with that drawing is you have to drag those voters out. So you have to drag them out into the east. You can get basically what I would guess would happen is there are 4 seats that are locked in. Or actually, sorry, there are 3 seats that are locked in, and then there's a 4th that is likely. No, actually, there's either 3 or 4. So
is Alma Adams' district VRA?
Yes, the Charlotte seat, but also it's not going to be new. That'd be really, really dumb. So the Charlotte seat, which I think the difference will be this time, is I don't think Huntersville will be in the seat. So North Charlotte, which I'll pull up my map I made of the household income, because it's actually pretty useful for a reason why this will happen. So basically, this area up here is North Charlotte, North Mech as it's called. The city of Charlotte's right here. You'll notice it's substantially lower income, but especially these areas up here. So basically, once you cross this line right here, you go from affluent white suburbs, competitive area, to very African American areas. I don't want to say impoverished because it's not universally so, but it's certainly a lower income level than right here, where you're by a lake and there's very, very high income. The only reason this area is not as high is because it has a college in it, Davidson College. So I think this portion of Mecklenburg County will go into a Republican seat. I think that's a reasonable choice because of the background for it. So that's one aspect of that is certain, that I think, is that it'll draw out. The question is where Dan Bishop's seat goes. He lives closer to uptown Charlotte. For those who aren't familiar with Charlotte, what most cities call downtown, Charlotte calls uptown. So uptown is the central business district. It's right in the center of the city. It's a really center city. Charlotte would be another term you could use. The areas to there's a portion of the city called the Wedge. So basically, if you go from center city and you go down, and then you have a line going. I don't know the term for degrees, but you have a line going parallel. That's the Wedge, and that's traditionally a Republican area. It's become more Democratic. It's very affluent, very white, very wealthy. Dan Bishop lives there. Also, Tim Moore wants a seat, and he wants part of Charlotte in it. So the
Quick
challenge.
question.
Go right ahead.
When Dan Bishop was elected to Congress, did his seat flip afterwards?
No, his seat is still Republican.
Wow.
Well, keep in mind his Senate district was redrawn. So
Okay.
if that was the case, then yes. But his seat had was literally the Wedge. It was basically the portion of Charlotte that is in the 9th congressional district. It's a traditionally quite Republican area that has become not so Republican in recent years. So the question is how that's divvied up. Next up, you got Wake County. Wake will absolutely be getting a seat. The question is how it's split up. I think the most reasonable way to split it for Republicans would be to split the southern area of it. There's a southwestern wedge or southeastern wedge that is very Republican, and then draw out parts of Cary and then kind of split that up. There's also a possibility that rather than drawing in Durham into the African American seat, which I'll mention in a bit, they draw in the black portions of Wake County. I think that's actually the best option, personally, but I think G.K. Butterfield is going to push for Durham being in his seat. So, and then you of course have the Chapel Hill seat, which Chapel Hill, Durham, probably Chatham County, maybe Alamance, a few other areas, and then the VRA seat. So that's 3 or 4, depending on where Durham goes. Basically, if Durham does not go there, Republicans are going to have to draw a first that doesn't have too many black voters, but also doesn't have too few black voters. They're also going to have to please G.K. Butterfield, who is in a competitive trending seat and will certainly
Under its current iteration.
Yeah, its current iteration. He won by a lesser than expected margin.
In fact, I think it's plurality white now.
Yeah. Oh, it's always been plurality white. It's a very challenging. Yeah, it's an unusual situation. So basically, here we go. I think this is a good.
Yeah. While you're bringing that up, Drew Savicki, I think, was pointing out that the G.K. Butterfield, Sanford Bishop, and I think a couple others, like, we're in a unique category of being African Americans who have historically appealed to rural white voters.
Yes, they tend to be more appealing, but at the same time, in his most recent election, that was not the case. So in his most recent election, he did not actually do that much better than Biden, which is unfortunate for him for obvious reasons. So that's kind of a problematic aspect that Democrats are really working with in North Carolina is that. So the question is, which Democrat gets cut? It's almost certainly going to be Kathy Manning, who represents the triad seat.
You really think that they can crack the triad without overextending?
Oh, it's super easy to do that. Again, you have to just bring in one. The area still leans Republican overall, even if the 2 counties in the center are Democratic. Keep in mind, these Republican counties are 70% Trump county, 65, 70, 75%. The other is you can draw in those Piedmont areas that I was talking about, the area where I live, which is the traditionally Republican Unionist areas. You can draw those in, no issue at all. And it would be fairly simple and easy to do. I'm trying to find the exact map I had made that kind of demonstrates this case point. I think this is it.
Yeah. Is it weird that I thought you lived in New Hanover County for some reason?
That's pretty weird. I live in Western North Carolina. I don't live in the East. This map looks terrible. Why do I keep getting terrible maps pulled up? Sorry, I keep finding the wrong North Carolina. I have like 100 North Carolina maps. But so basically the way you do that is you split Greensboro, you give Patrick Henry, who was my representative, is no longer my representative because I live in Alexander County now, which is a different county than where I was before. Basically, the way you do that is, it's a fairly simple process. And I think, okay, this one looks right. I think I may actually have the right map this time. So basically, at that point, you have those done. The East is super easy to draw as well. Like, I don't know if this is exactly what Republicans are going to draw, but this would be a fairly safe bet for them in terms of doing it. Because the East is where actually the Republicans are gaining votes, so they can actually count on those seats trending Republican, whereas the other ones they kind of need to worry about them trending Democratic a little bit. So here is one possibility that I've done, and this is a little bit of an unorthodox coalition of what I mentioned before, but this is still a 10 to this is still a 11-3 map, which is aggressive, but also very, very viable. So
is it 10-4 or 11-3?
11-3.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So again,
wow.
and it's super easy to do. Again, here's why. This is the underrated possibility. This is my Eric prediction. If Republicans go aggressive, here's how you'll know. Orange County, Greensboro, Burlington in between. This is 3 Democratic areas. Draw them into one seat. You have a David Price, Kathy Manning primary challenge. On the one hand, you have the second is still there. The first right here. So this is actually, this is not 11-3. Sorry, this is 10-4. You could actually.
No, that's what I
11-3.
thought. That 10-4 sounds more viable.
Yeah, so this is still 10-4. You can do 11-3. It's pretty viable. But the way I've done it, you'll notice here is that I split Forsyth County up. So half of it goes to District 5 and half of it goes to District 10. Then you have 8. Fayetteville gets split up in half. 2 takes in these white areas, suburban areas. 3, this looks more Democratic than it is. It's R plus 10. It's probably more like R plus 15 now. And then you have 9, which has, you'll notice I mentioned that Tim Moore, who lives in Cleveland County, he lives in this area right here.
Mm-hmm.
He wants Charlotte in a seat. So the way you can do this, which would actually allow Dan Bishop to be in the same seat and do this, is to give him Huntersville and this area down here, Pineville. And then Dan Bishop lives somewhere around here. I think I have the exact precinct in here, but he lives like that's the central city up there. And then this is the Wedge. And you can kind of see the rough guide of what the Wedge looks like. Yeah. Well, oops, let me turn the city lines off and turn the district lines. So that's the Wedge, right? This is roughly. So
it looks less blue than the others.
Yeah, and it's not, and the way I mentioned here is, again, this doesn't look great. It also doesn't look that bad. Again, you got a lot of strings, but generally speaking, it's not that bad. Democrats wouldn't be happy, but
can you get away with just 2 blue seats in Raleigh-Durham?
You can get rid of, yes, you can get away with that. And so basically, this portion of Wake is the way it's drawn right here, is it doesn't have any of Cary, and it takes in this area right here is still Republican. It elected a Republican House rep down ballot. This area up here is as well, and it kind of draws along here. So the big thing again is, as long as Johnson County, Franklin is Republican, this part of Nash is Republican, and then these areas right here, Republican. So this seat right now would be, even for Roy Cooper, would be McCrory plus 13. Mm-hmm. So very, very viable. The alternative again is a different one. The alternative is what would be a 10-4. Or sorry, 9-5.
One you showed me was 10-4.
The problem with 9-5 is Republicans actually don't really gain any safer seats. That's a paradox, right? As you're giving Democrats another seat. So in theory, the remaining Republican seats should be safer.
Right, but the current map is 8-5, though.
Yes, but again, let me show you the problem here. So let's look at how these areas voted. Let's pull up the partisan lane. So you'll notice right here. Let's turn off district lines. So basically, district lines, county lines. Here's your problem. These are where the Republican voters are. So let's say you give Democrats Mecklenburg 1 seat there, Wake 1 seat there, Raleigh-Durham, Chatham, Chatham, and then this right here. So that's 3 seats so far. A rural seat up here. That's another seat, and then one right here. That's should be 8-5 map, or sorry, a 9-5 map, right? Republicans don't actually gain anything because the places they're taking votes from don't actually matter. These seats are going to be red regardless. So all giving Democrats the sink does right here is make these seats, which are already very, very red, like Republican plus 15, 20 seats, makes them redder. Doesn't do anything for over here. Over here doesn't change.
Certainly helps Ted Budd. He went from like a almost swing district to a safe seat.
Yeah, well, Ted Budd, he's not running here. He's in Davie County. But again, the way you divide this thing up, and I don't want to do a live map or anything, but like you get the idea. I actually have the baseline of a of a reasonably fair map here. So what we'll do here is it's not going to take too long. I'll give you like the baseline problem for Republicans here. So let's say we get rid of 5, 10, 6, 13. Those all go, oops, let's keep 1 because 1 is pretty reasonable. Durham being in that seat is actually pretty reasonable. Actually, there we go. Okay, perfect. And then we get rid of 14. Okay, so actually 14 can stay. So let's do, because that's going to look like that regardless. Okay.
I wish I had the software like you have.
It's DRA. It's DRA 2020. It's free, available online. Cloud saving, available on your computer. It's a great website. You can do this at home. It's not so let's just say we draw something like this. Very simple. Democrats get a safe seat in this area. Boom. I
really love how it goes like down to the precinct level.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it works very, very well. So let's just say we decide not to give Butterfield that. We give Butterfield something more like this. Give him. So I'm doing a weird calculation here.
Yeah, and I definitely want to go like eventually into the lightning round about how each state is gonna do.
Yeah, but this is pretty quick. You'll get an idea of what I'm going at here. So you got this right here. That's simple. 3 right here. Whatever. Give them there. I'm not going to go into like population depth or anything because it doesn't really matter. Okay, well, you get the idea. So then give 2, whatever, something like that. So you've got all of these pieces in place, right? You gave them a better seat. You gave them that central seat right here. How does this actually help Republicans? The answer is it doesn't. Because look at all that's left. It's all Republican. Can you string this all the way down here? Like, can you?
That's all the size of one district?
No. Like this is multiple seats left. So this is about 1, 2, 3. This is about 3.5 seats left.
Is that Nash County in the north, like north left corner?
What do you mean? This is Nash County.
That's Nash County. I don't know what there's like patch of blue right in the northwest corner.
That's where Roy Cooper's from. So you could draw it like this, but all this does to make a Republican plus 23 seat. How does that help Republicans? All it did make is red seat that was never going to flip redder. Like, you get the idea here. It's like basically the way you draw it. If you give Democrats an extra seat, it has to come from one area, the center of the state, which is right next to a bunch of Republican areas. So I don't see it being any better for Democrats than 10-4. I think 10-4 is what they can really hope for. If Republicans are really nice and just decide they don't want to have a triad seat and they're going to be very nice to Kathy Manning, which I doubt, they could just not draw that. But there's really no benefit for them, partisan-wise, in protecting any of their other seats. It does not help them at all in any competitive swing seats to do that. So that's the dynamic there, is that even though you're giving Democrats an extra seat, it doesn't actually benefit Republicans at all, partisan-wise. So there's no reason for them to do it.
Right. I just think an 11-3 map would be possibly an overextension, as the 10-3 map arguably was.
Definitely, because you have to take more of Wake County in, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah. No, I think that 10-4 I think is the best that Republicans could hope for.
Yeah, 10-4 would be really viable for them.
Yeah. But anyway, let's rapid fire. Like Alabama is that's going to be a Republican gerrymander. Like
6-1.
Yeah. Alaska's at large. Arizona, that's a more interesting one though.
It's going to have I think it's going to be 5-4 Republican. I just don't know if it's going to come out of Tucson or if it's going to come out of the first district. I think Tucson will be unwatched. Republicans really want Tucson back for some reason. That would be really dumb of them.
Pima County is much bluer than Maricopa.
Yeah. Well, Pima County is Tucson, and they really want it back, and that's dumb, and they should just give it up on it and just take a 5-4.
Yeah, Arkansas is going to be 4-0, but I would argue a fair map would be 3-1.
Yes, 3-1, or at least 3-1, or at least 3-0-1.
Right. California, I have no idea what they're going to do.
I think Republicans could lose a seat or two, but they also could gain a couple of seats because, like, they arguably got screwed out of a Northern California seat last time.
Yeah.
They could, if so, they could lose a seat in SoCal if the commission gives them the NorCal seat they really deserve.
Yeah.
They could gain a seat right there, and also the Valley. The Valley is drawn in a very unusual way, which does not really make a lot of sense, and they could actually gain if that was drawn fairly.
Yeah, we could keep talking about this hours. I just want to quickly ask, what is Mike Garcia's game? He's voting. People are pointing out that he and Beth Van Dyne, despite being in Democratic seats, are voting like Freedom Caucus members. At least that's how they characterize it.
I don't know. I think he's. I mean, again, he could be running for a VP or a cabinet spot, but also
But I just want to say, because like I understand where Beth Van Dyne's coming from, because she could get her seat shored up, whereas with Garcia, I don't see that happening.
His seat is more fiscally conservative. He's basically betting that his fiscally conservative leanings will carry him. I'm not sure if it works because I don't know how much of LA County it's going to take. Right. I can say for sure LA County should be split into two counties. The north of the San Gabriel Mountain should be its own county. That's Lancaster, Palmdale.
Yeah, there's almost like this uninterrupted like interruption of space. Like I've been there. It's like between like Hollywood and the rest. Like you know what I'm talking about?
It's north of the mountains. That's the area that he's really going off of. But yeah, I don't think it's. I mean, he could take more Bakersfield. It really could be going for that sort of thing. So we really don't know.
Yeah, Garcia. Right now, I have him as the only Republican incumbent as a toss-up.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Yeah. Colorado.
I don't know how they're going to draw it. It could be 8. It could be 5-3. It could be 4-4. We don't know.
Connecticut is probably going to be
5-0. But
I would say a fair map's 4-1.
Yeah, Republicans could win. Republicans could win though the 5th seat in a good year.
Right, but I think that Connecticut, I think, is legislature only, but I think it's a 2/3 majority.
It's going to be a map of least change. That's what the tradition is when they can't get 2/3.
Right.
That's what the current map was the least change from the previous decade's map, and it's going to be the same this time.
Okay, Delaware's 1 seat. Florida's going to be brutal.
Honestly, Delaware is one of the most egregious partisan gerrymanders in the country.
but Florida,
Republicans win like 45% of the vote in Delaware, but only have 0 seats.
Well, you could argue that Delaware really does deserve a 2nd seat, and under a Wyoming plan, they would have it.
It would be Republican leaning, but yeah, let's keep going in the lightning round. Florida could be 17-11, or actually they get 28, so it could be 17-11, could be 18-10. Yeah. Not all of that is gerrymandering. I mean, some of it is, but
I would argue a fair map is 15-13. But some of those seats, but some of the blue seats would probably still elect Republicans.
Yeah, that's the Democratic problem there. Candidate quality, and also Cubans.
Yeah, because this was probably changed recently, but for a long time, Republicans in Miami were more Republican down ballot than they were up ballot.
Yeah.
I often make I'm going to go off on a tangent here. There are parts of the country that I point out, like Long Island, Dayton, Ohio, South Jersey, where they were Democrats, but they voted for Republicans down ballot, and then they swung to Trump. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if that could change the type of Republicans who get elected there.
I mean, I think we're expecting Miami-Dade to be competitive at a county-wide level in the statewide races this time. So,
wow, the Democrats will not win if that's the case.
Yeah, well, they're not going to win, so that is the case.
Georgia,
8-6 Republican.
8-6. So as opposed to 10-4.
Lucy McBath gets a safe seat,
and Carolyn Bordeaux gets a safe seat.
No, she gets drawn out.
So that's not sounds more like 9-5.
They get 14 seats. What is it right now? It's 7-7, or is it 8-6?
It is currently 8-6.
Okay, yes. Okay, so 9-5 then.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
9-5. Carolyn Bordeaux does not. They're not going to draw in a white lib for a safe seat. They're going to draw in.
Will they just put all of Forsyth in her district and call it a day?
It's already all of Forsyth is pretty much already there, but they can.
Well, some of Forsyth is in Andrew Clyde.
Yeah, they can crack up Gwinnett, but really the big thing is Lucy McBath lives in Marietta, and it's easy to draw another VRA seat there. So,
you don't think they're going to go for the jugular and go for 10-4?
No, they'd be stupid to do that.
Okay, so you and Niles Francis are of one mind on that.
Yes.
Hawaii 2-0, an egregious gerrymander.
I actually quite like their congressional map. It's actually quite reasonable.
Hawaii is interesting because the rurals were for a long time more Democratic than the city.
George Bush almost won Honolulu.
Yep. Yeah. I recently found that out. 51-48 was Kerry in Honolulu. That's And I think even to this day, the rurals are still more democratic than
Yeah,
the
because the
city.
rurals have more Pacific Islanders, Native
Whereas the
Hawaiians.
city's more white.
Yeah. Well, they have more Asians.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians are more liberal.
Does Lilo and Stitch take place in Maui?
It takes place on the Big Island.
Oh, in the Big Island. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it takes place on the. Let me check.
I thought for some reason it was Maui.
It's not in. It's not in.
It's not in Honolulu. It's not
It's
in
not
Oahu.
in Honolulu. Yeah, it's on rural.
It is definitely not in Oahu.
No, it's a Kauai.
Kauai. That's
Yeah,
what it is.
sorry, Kauai. Yeah,
Kauai.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the furthest one out. One of the furthest one out in the chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the opposite side from the Big Island.
Idaho, 2-0. Very fair map. Very fair map.
It's actually pretty reasonable. Yeah, but 2-0. Yeah.
Yeah. Illinois. What are they going to do? So are they going for the jugular?
What is it right now? It's I think they could draw in as few as 3 Republicans, but that'd be a big risk.
Yeah, I'm expecting them to just chop up Sherry Bustos' district.
Yeah, I mean the drafts I've seen, they've only drawn 3 Republican districts, but that's way too risky for Chicagoland.
I mean,
so
to me,
so nominally 14-3. In practice, maybe more like 12-5.
I think 12-5 makes more sense. Shore up Underwood and cut Sherry Bustos loose.
Yeah, they really want 2 downstate seats for some reason.
Yeah, no, I don't think that is a smart. Just cede downstate to the Republicans and shore up the Chicago Metro. Yeah. Indiana.
It's either going to be 6-2 or 7-1. They have 8 seats. Or sorry, they have 9.
They have 9.
Yeah. So the question is whether or not the first gets demolished or not. Frank Mervan's seat, I'm inclined to think they demolish it.
Yeah, no, it got closer, didn't it?
Yeah, even if it's not demolished, it'll be Republican by the end of the decade. So
let me just see what Indiana's it's like one of those like
it's what's known locally as the region. It's Chicago. It has
it's East Chicago.
It has one of the saddest cities in the country, which is Gary, Indiana. A decaying. Really decaying town.
Biden won it by single digits.
Yeah, it's going to be Republican by the end of the decade, even if it's a fair map.
Yeah,
so I think they just speeded up the process and just nipped that in the bud.
Atlas of Redistricting had their version supposedly would have elected 9-0.
That's not going to happen because Indianapolis is they're not going to split up Indianapolis. That's just not viable.
You could split up the Northeast, and I would say if you want to be smart, take Indiana's 5th out of Marion County, and then just have the 4th taken some of it instead.
What I would say would be smart is if they drew Gary and then drew like a little dangling salamander string all the way to Indianapolis.
That looks like a monstrosity.
yes, it would, but that would be one thing they could do. But I think they just see that. I think they could just. You could easily just put like one Democratic district in Marion County and then call it a day. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, but what they'll switch.
Go ahead.
What they'll switch is currently the seat, because they were hoping they could win. The 5th has the conservative southern portion of Marion County in the 5th district. So what they'll do is they'll
southern or northern?
Southern Marion County is the conservative end. The northern end is also traditionally conservative, but is trended Democratic. So
the 5th goes that far south?
What's the 5th?
The 5th is Victoria Sparks.
Oh no, what's the other district? The Indianapolis seat.
Andre Carson's seat, I think, is what you're
talking about. So Andre Carson's seat has southern Marion County, which is the conservative portion.
Oh, so they could have like Buckshot take that on.
Yeah, so they could basically flip it. They could give Andre Carson the northern portion of the county and have the good Republicans in the southern portion have a decent representative.
Yeah, and then you take Sparks out of Marion County altogether.
Yeah, well, she's in she's in the county to the north, the suburban county. But regardless, Indianapolis, they're going to divide that up. But yeah, let's keep going.
Iowa.
Ooh, 4-0.
Oh my, that is risky. That is incredibly risky.
Yes, I think they're very, very angry about what Democrats tried to do with Iowa 2nd, and so their strategy will be no more Democrats. They're just gonna.
I think if they're smart, I actually measure this. They're smart. Cindy Axie's district is Polk, Story. Basically the counties on each side, Polk and the counties on all 4 sides, and then I guess just have a slice of Boone. What
they want to do is they want to just make her county a line and just take it from Des Moines to Iowa City, and that would be viable. That would be legal under the current thing, but I think they're very angry. And
You could easily make I think that you would be overextending if you went 4-0.
No. It's not, because you want to get not Lynn County, but Iowa City is
Johnson County.
Yeah, Johnson County is way more liberal, and they'd rather have them in the same seat than have to risk the second and the first. And so basically, it's either going to be 4-0 or 3-1.
Yeah, fair map would be 2-2, but
fair map would be 3-1.
Right. But what about a communities of interest district that's basically Cedar Rapids and Iowa City going to Dubuque and
I'd argue that's a Dem gerrymander, because does not, it's way that the median seat is way to the left of the state. But
that seat would be very left wing. Would that be even more left wing than my proposal of Polk and the counties on all four sides?
Yes, I know a Democrat who would agree with me on that, an Iowa Dem who would take a 2 to, and currently the current divide of Iowa into like north.
You drew a 2-2 map, just so you know.
Yeah, I don't like it, but let's keep going.
Anyway, yeah, I could rehash Iowa, but anyway, I say 3-1 is the best way to go, honestly.
Yeah.
Kansas.
4-0.
Do you really think they're going to be dumb enough to try to crack Kansas?
Oh, it's not dumb. It's not very dumb. It's very smart. What they do is they throw in the most liberal portion of Kansas, which is Kansas City, with the big first, including the city of Liberal on the other side of the state.
I'd say Johnson, Wyandotte, I think, or most of Johnson, Wyandotte, I think is the most viable, and it basically lets you shore up the other three. Whereas,
they don't care. They want Sharice Davids out. That's the big thing, and they can do it.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. Kentucky 6-0.
Yep.
Louisiana.
Same as the current ones. That's
we're not going to get an Edwards-Mander.
JBE can get a budget, or he can get a second congressional district.
Okay, so no JBE Mander.
No. Best they can do is make it look a little bit more compact.
Maine.
1-1.
Same as now, basically.
Yeah.
Massachusetts. Actually, sorry, I'm skipping one. Maryland.
8-0.
8-0. I agree. Fair map would be 6-2, but they're gonna go 8-0. Massachusetts.
9-0.
Of course. Yeah. No, actually, it's really hard to draw a Republican district there.
You can draw competitive ones, but not Republican ones.
Yeah. Michigan.
Oh, I have no idea.
I'm going to say 6-6-1.
It's an independent commission, so we have no clue what they're going to do.
Right. No, I'd say that what you could.
They hired the Picasso of gerrymandering too. Literally, that's what his nickname is.
Let me tell you what my fantasy is. You have two heavily Democratic districts in downtown Detroit. Sure. One that I think is also Democratic, but also takes in what's it called? Ann Arbor.
Yes, that makes sense. Wayne County and Ann Arbor.
Yeah, two competitive suburban seats that would, I guess, be held by Andy Levin.
Yeah, Andy Levin would have a safe one. Andy Levin and Haley Stevens would be safe because they'd get two Democratic. They won in South Macomb and Oakland, and another just in Oakland.
Right, and hear me out. You basically have Dan Kildee and Alyssa Slotkin fight over a Democratic district that is basically Lansing and Flint.
I disagree with that idea strongly.
Okay.
That's not a good community. What they wanted, the current fifth where it goes up into the cities is a good formula. But I think that you can make Slotkins more competitive by throwing in Lansing. And basically
doesn't her district already Lansing?
Yeah, but it goes to Oakland County and has Ingram County in between. So basically shifting it to the middle of the state.
Okay, so there goes my idea of a Lansing Flint
and
district.
Then Kent County in theory should be competitive seat because it's Peter Mayer, but also Democratic County. So
and here there's basically a bunch of like 5 safe Republican districts that are either rural, like Northern Peninsula, or the middle of the state. That in the case of 2 districts, then others that are like Tim Walberg's district is also quite Republican. It's basically southern part of the state.
Yeah.
Then there's a Lenar district that's basically Kalamazoo. And then finally so basically you have 6 districts that are either safe or Lenar, and then finally there's a highly competitive one in Kent and to the west of that.
That's possible. What we really don't know what Michigan's going to look like.
Anyway, I just thought that's what a good map would look like.
Yeah.
But I'm clearly wrong according to you about the Lansing Flint district.
I have thought in theory Lansing and Ann Arbor would be a good fit together because they're both college counties, but I'm apparently wrong about that. So
Yeah. I just looked at a map and say what is equal in population?
Yeah.
And yeah. Minnesota.
4-4.
Yeah, that sounds likely.
Split legislature, split delegation.
Yep, and it's already it seems like the most obvious thing to do, and the fact that they have 4 seats makes it easy to do. Mississippi 3-1. Missouri, I said 7-1. You
6-2.
You think it's gonna be 6-2?
Yeah.
Okay, Montana 2-0.
2-0.
Nebraska
3-0.
You think? Are you think they're going to change the way that Nebraska's second is currently constituted?
I think they're going to. I think Bacon is kind of invulnerable to make a seat safer.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that. They could easily split Omaha.
It's not hard to do. It's really not hard to do.
The question is, do they want like because it's not a partisan legislature, so are they going to want to do that?
It's a Republican majority. They can if they want to.
Yeah, I think they tried to do something like the last time and they didn't do it.
We'll see.
Yeah,
they made the seat. They made the seat redder. If it was
I think the Nebraska legislature actually has some form of filibuster.
We'll see. I think Republicans have a majority enough to do that.
Yeah. Anyway, Nevada.
Ooh, that's a tricky one.
I think
the legislature is going to try to go 3-1.
Yeah, I think they're going to try for 3-1.
That's really risky. It's really hard to do.
Basically 2 in all the districts are going to be in Clark County somehow.
Yeah, well, except for the second. But yeah, it's.
I think that they could draw a second. It's basically all of rural Nevada swinging down to the southern part of Clark County.
That's super risky. I think they really could they're going to try to draw something a little bit. I don't know, but they're going to try to do 3-1.
Yeah, I think I could see one basically stretching from Clark County all the way to Reno Sparks.
You could do that, but that'd be really, really risky.
What you think is going to look different than that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to wait till the next episode of Redistricting Map or the Map Room to find that out. New Hampshire.
1-1.
1-1. Even though I think the best you can draw, I think, is like a Biden +2.
Well,
district.
again, the current map is kind of weird. They could make it easily be 2. I mean, again, Biden's performance is not indicative of the typical lead of New Hampshire.
Right. But I heard that New Hampshire, by the way, was also going to consider adopting a Maine system for electoral votes.
That's not going to happen, I don't think.
That's not going to happen? Okay.
No.
New Jersey.
What is it right now? 10-2?
Yeah, I think it's going to be 10-2. I think
10-2.
What Democrats would want to do is 1 Republican district in Ocean County, 1 in Sussex County.
It's 10-2 or 9-3. The question is if they throw Tom Malinowski to the Wolves.
If they throw Tom Malinowski, they'll also probably throw Jeff Andrew.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Malinowski is he's having a stock scandal and it may not be worth it. But again, it's either going to be 10-2 or 9-3.
Yeah, it'll probably boil over, honestly.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. New Mexico.
2-1.
2-1.
They have an independent commission. They have an independent commission now.
Oh, they have an independent commission.
Or they have some form of commission. They back down on that.
So they backed down on a 3-0.
Probably, I would bet the tribes are pretty angry at them because there's really only a couple ways to gerrymander, and one of them is to split the tribes up. So
is Lagar Fernandez's district potential in the long term for Republicans to pick up?
In theory, it's a better target than the first. In practice, the Native Americans are very durable. So I would have it's a stretch goal.
Right. New York.
What is it right now?
I was going to say 9-10, 9-8, 19-8. Sorry, 19-8.
Yeah,
because Delgado survived.
It really depends on if the legislature does what the commission wants. There's a possibility the progressives hold up their end and push for a fair map. Otherwise, you could easily draw a map that's 5 Republicans, which would be 2. Basically, I think, in my opinion, is that you draw 3 upstate, you draw 1 in Long Island, and then you do draw 1 in Staten Island, but you haven't taken the Orthodox Jewish areas. The main reason for that is it's very, very risky.
You can't crack Staten Island?
There's only 1 bridge.
There's only 1 bridge.
Yeah, you could do the ferry, but like the big issue for them is VRA. I don't think it's possible to draw a VRA map that meets all the requirements and has the Democrats drawing the seat they want. Like you can't do Manhattan to Staten Island at this point. That's the reason why. So basically, it'd be 5 Republicans.
My fantasy was basically Southern Staten Island, Borough Park, and Williamsburg.
Yeah, like I actually have the map that I made of New York that I can show, like to do the thought process. But the
Yeah.
problem with New York is that Democrats are having to protect their own members from primary challenges. They're having to protect also the VRA, which is going to require a certain number of districts. Like, for example, Grace Meng is going to demand her seat be more Asian. Right now, it's not Asian plurality. She will demand it be the case. And I think she'll.
Yeah, I'm surprised that did they chop up Anthony Weiner's district like after he resigned? Because I feel like
After he retired. Yeah, his seat was a weird. It was a weird seat. It was a very, very strange seat.
Yeah, Chuck Schumer held it, then Anthony Weiner. Then I feel like Yvette Clarke ended up in that area.
Yeah, it was not a reasonable looking district, but I actually have my New York map here. I'm going to pull it up.
It's almost hard to compare districts like from past decades because New York has lost a seat in each decade. It's hard to sort of compare like the district that Kirsten Gillibrand won in 2006. I don't know what that would correspond to.
Not just one; they've lost to multiple seats every decade, except for this one. So this is basically a Democratic map. I think they could draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have
Borough Park, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's Borough Park and the other Orthodox Jewish area. Because the one thing is that Democrats are fine putting the Orthodox Jews with Nadler. They're not going to throw the Orthodox Jews with the Black community.
I'm assuming they does Nadler still have some of the Orthodox Jewish communities?
He has Borough Park.
Oh, he has. Oh, I thought that the version you just drew would have given.
No. They are Malatakis to see this. So, like, basically, the problem with New York is there are several standards they want to keep. 1, all incumbents safe from primary challenges. 2, all incumbents safe in general. 3, VRA compliance. 4, Orthodox Jews do not go with Black voters.
So Borough Park. So is Borough Park going to go to Maliotakis?
I think they would be wise to do that because I don't think they could do VRA compliant otherwise, while also keeping in mind they're not going to throw the Orthodox Jews into a Black district. There are so many historical conflicts between the communities there that the Orthodox would be irate, to put it lightly.
And even in other districts like Espaillat's district, like there's also, I think, a Black community in that district, and they often compete with the Hispanic voters. Yes,
that's the problem. Is I really am not sure how they do it. So that's why again I think they do five Republicans.
By the way, I just want to say that we're both pro-Israel, and I know we're both conservative, but I do hope that Richie Torres is able to survive his primary challenge.
Hopefully.
I like him. I like him. Like, you know, if progressives are going to take over the Democrats, then I wanted people like Richie Torres to do it.
Apparently, the Orthodox like Mondier Jones as well. So there is that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
because I thought he was more left than Richie Torres in some sense.
They endorsed him. The Orthodox rabbis endorsed Mondier Jones for some reason.
Yeah. We're going to talk about upcoming elections in the next month in just a second. North Carolina, we just talked about. North Dakota, an egregious Republican gerrymander.
Yeah.
Ohio.
I get. I want to not go off on tangents. I think Republicans are going to draw at least 3 Democratic seats.
Yeah, I'd say Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati.
Yeah, maybe 4, but really 3. So
you think that they cut Capter and Shabbat?
Yes.
Yeah. Oklahoma 5-0.
Yeah.
Oregon
4-2.
4-2 is what I'm thinking. Yeah. Pennsylvania
evenly. It's what, 17 seats? I think 8 to 6-6-1. Oh no, sorry, not 6-6. How many? They have 17. Yeah, 8-8-1. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Cartwright is vulnerable.
Yeah. Very, very,
very, very vulnerable. Rhode Island 2-0. I'm surprised it's actually 2-0. By the way.
Yeah, everyone thought they were going to lose a seat, but they didn't.
Yeah. South Carolina 6-1. South Dakota 1-0. Tennessee
8-1.
8-1. So Indiana. What's the difference between Cleaver and there's
Cooper? There's no difference. It's just Cooper almost lost to a DSA candidate,
whereas Cleaver has not shown any signs of that.
Yeah, that's literally it.
I mean,
also Cooper is white.
Yeah, I'd say if Clay goes down, then I think Cleaver could also go down.
Kansas City is not St. Louis.
Right. So. That's why I thought that they would crack it.
Yeah, but they're not going to. So.
Texas.
What do they have? 38 seats.
They're going to get 38.
How many do they have right now?
Right now, I think it's 23 to 13. So that's
20,
currently at 36. They're getting 38.
26 to 12.
Wow. My guess is basically what they would, if they're smart, they would give Fletcher and Allred vote sinks.
Fletcher will get a vote sink, but she'll get primaried by a minority Democrat.
Okay. And then try to see if they can get Phil Monvella's district in a red seat.
I don't know how much I'm at liberty to discuss, but I do not think they're going to have as many Democratic RGV seats. So I think keep an eye for 26 to 12.
At this point, due to a technical error, the audio for this portion of the podcast was lost. But basically, Eric and I were plotting the Texas Republican Party's plans for drawing the lines of the Rio Grande Valley. And while I cannot divulge to you the details of that plan at this time, rest assured, everyone will get what they want, no one will get what they want, and the map will be absolutely horrendous. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program.
I've said too much.
Utah 4-0.
Yeah, 4-0.
Vermont 1-0. Virginia.
Ooh, that is tricky.
They have an independent commission now.
6-5.
6-5.
Yeah.
I mean, Henrico, Charlottesville.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, they're not going to do that. I mean, like
the Democrats don't want They don't want Charlottesville with the Richmond Burbs.
Okay. So it's that would be hard to shore up Albuquerque. I'd say in some ways Spanberger is more shore upable because of the swing than Luria.
Luria will have problems. Virginia.
Yeah, Luria's seat is not trending anywhere. It's perpetually competitive. Yeah, and she has a strong challenger now.
Yeah, Virginia Beach is a problem area for Democrats.
Yeah. Like I think that her seat was actually Obama to Trump, I think.
Yeah, it was it's a unusual district, to put it lightly.
Yeah. Washington.
What's their current map?
7-3. Actually, am I right about that? There's
Butler, 7-3.
Butler, Rogers, and Newhouse, I think is
7-3. That's what's going to be.
Yeah. West Virginia 3-0. Wisconsin
2-0. 2-0.
West Virginia 2-0. Sorry. Wisconsin
6-2.
6-2. Even with Tony Evers' veto.
Yeah, they can't save Kind at this point.
Okay, and Wyoming is 1-0.
Yeah. The most egregious Republican gerrymander of them all.
Yes. Yes. That's why we need a double Wyoming plan.
Yeah.
So just wanted to talk about a couple of elections coming up, and if you got to get going, and then we can certainly end it there if you want. But New Mexico's first, I think, is the elephant in the room.
Yeah, Democrats are favored. So
Democrats are favored. I thought there was going to be something interesting, but it turns out it seems Democrat only slightly down.
The big question is if Republicans can get it within 10. If they can get it in single digits, if they can get it in single digits, I think they're going to be fairly pleased with themselves.
Okay. And New York City mayor.
Ooh, it's a 2-horse race between Adams and Yang. I'm rooting for Adams personally.
I think Garcia has emerged.
Everson is crap. They're Memerson.
Okay.
I would be shocked if she is top 3. But again, I think it's a 2-horse race between Yang and Adams. I like Adams more than Yang.
I don't know why. I like Yang for some reason.
Adams is a former cop, former Republican, actually. So I'm actually in favor of him over Yang.
Yeah, and of course, everybody's rooting for Stringer. Everyone's, of course, rooting for Stringer.
Yeah, my progressive friends are not pleased that basically New York is their choice between Andrew Yang and a former Republican cop. So...
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't like Yang in the presidential run. In his run for New York City, he's actually spoken to issues that I care about.
Yeah, I think the funny thing, though, is I think it was very funny when he said that his favorite subway station is Times Square, which was just a meme. Like, New Yorkers were like, nobody's favorite subway station is Times Square.
I mean, mine is 42nd Street Port Authority bus terminal.
I've never actually been to New York City. I want to go sometime.
Yeah, I lived there for 4 years. It's an
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Yeah, I went to university there,
Where'd you live? Or where'd you live?
Washington Heights.
Oh, so Manhattan or
Yeah,
Brooklyn? Yeah.
northern tip of Manhattan.
Nice, nice. See, I know Manhattan reasonably well because the Spider-Man 2 video game for the GameCube had all of Manhattan explorable. It had all the neighborhood names. So at least I know all the names of the neighborhoods for Manhattan. So
Right. We could talk more. We could go all night if you wanted to.
yeah, I got another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to ask, like, is there any evidence that like the swing that we saw with Latinos is long term, or is it just more ebbs and flows? Because like Bush did well with Latinos, and
Biden's issue is basically the problem with Latino voters for Biden is they're not black voters. They're basically coming out of block voting, and they're more culturally conservative and fiscally conservative than the rest of the party. So it's kind of I would not be shocked if Republicans actually win Cameron County or Hidalgo County.
I knew they were socially conservative. I did not know they were necessarily fiscally conservative.
They're blue dog Democrats, especially in the Valley. They're
Right.
conservative Democrats,
No.
and the conservative part, as the party moves left, they're by default alienating those
Yeah.
people.
You know, the rural portions of the Rio Grande Valley, I talked about this in a tweet thread a while back, but I do agree with the rural portions of the Rio Grande Valley. There are long-term trends that suggest that those areas are becoming more Republican. In fact, I actually pointed out, I recently found this out. The more rural portions of the Rio Grande Valley, Wendy Davis did better in those areas than Lupe Valdez.
Yeah.
In the cities, it was the opposite.
Yeah, the problem, like even like Hidalgo County, Cameron County, Webb, all those counties saw massive double-digit swings, and actually Cornyn did better there than Trump. So, I mean, it was everywhere. It was a big problem. I think it is a long-term trend.
The question though is whether, I mean, we'll have to see about that, because I think that there's very little data to go by, but I think that people were pointing out.
I disagree. I think there's a lot of data to go by off for this.
One of the things that I'm going by is the Georgia runoffs from January. I think there was actually someone who pointed this out, that there's not a lot of Hispanic precincts in Georgia, but one of the few are in Gainesville, and apparently the precincts in the Hispanic precincts in Gainesville saw a bit of a snapback to what they were before.
It's Georgia. What I would say is this is not just a trend in one presidential election in Texas. This is a trend over an entire decade.
It's just in Texas. I agree with the rural Rio Grande Valley. That what I'm talking about is the swing we saw like place like Passaic, New Jersey, or in say Nevada. Like,
yeah, again, I would be very skeptical. That's just all I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I wish we had someone like I wish we had someone who could talk about this. Like, there's someone who was raising money for children in Venezuela. I forget her name, but I follow her and I really like what she says. I wish we could have had her on to discuss this. You probably know who I'm talking about.
I'm not sure actually.
Okay. Liz Cron, I think is what I'm. I think. I
need to check to see if I follow her. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I've been a fan of. I've donated to her project. But I wish we could have her on to sort of discuss more about this. She probably knows better than the two of us what's going on there.
Gotcha.
But particularly with Miami, because in Miami, Bush came within nearly 6 points of winning it both times.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I remember this whole discussion like a while back about, did Al Gore pick Joe Lieberman? Did that cost him the race? And I'm like, yeah, he could have. They're saying he could have picked Bob Graham and could have won Florida. Could have picked Gene Shaheen and won New Hampshire. He could have picked Blanche Lincoln and won Arkansas. To which I say, or bear with me here, he could have won his home state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
But I think that Joe Lieberman actually helped him in Florida. I think without Lieberman, it would have been something akin to Bush 04.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because Al Gore, I think, registered a performance in Palm Beach that Democrats have not seen since.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, but I'm skeptical. I'd have to see more data about whether or not Miami is in a sustained trend of just single-digit Democratic performances. I think, but because like one of the things that people were pointing out is that Democrats like made a big point in 2016 of how Trump was gonna upend their lives. And when that did not happen, there was a bit of a cry wolf scenario. What I'm wondering, though, is whether that'll happen the other way, given that Republicans told Latinos that Biden would be a socialist. So if Biden turns out not to be a socialist, will it happen the other way?
I'm not sure. I think his approval with Hispanics is not great, in part because of the immigration crisis. But
right, and I will also say, if immigration is the number one issue, it's going to be a red wave.
Mhm.
That's the one issue on which he is underwater.
Immigration, he's not doing well, and gun control or guns for that matter.
Even though he hasn't really done a lot on guns.
Yeah, it's yeah,
it's messaging really. But yeah, so I really want to see more. I want to see more elections about with particularly how Latinos vote. But one of the things I actually noticed is that Democrats had always been complaining that they were always getting fewer seats for their vote because they were so packed in cities. But if cities are getting redder and the suburbs are getting bluer, doesn't that give Democrats what they want of being more spread out?
Who knows?
Yeah, no, that's just something that I thought about when those results came in. That if Democrats are getting geographic diversity, that may be something that's better for them, because it means that the median seat doesn't go red when this nation goes blue. Anyway, this is just a tangent, and a lot of this is filler. But I just there's a lot that I guess is on my mind, but I'm okay with cutting it here. It's just because I was hoping to come up with another thing to talk about. But where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at @DECunningham2, and you can follow us on Twitter at elections_daily and elections-daily.com.
Yeah, you guys recently commissioned a poll.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I'd love to see. Oh yeah, what Virginia, the governor's race. That's the last thing I want to ask you about.
Ask Joe. He's more knowledgeable out than me.
Okay,
he likes the slate, but he likes the slate, but it's a tough state.
I asked him last week, and yeah, that's what he seems to think.
Really good slate, but a very, very difficult state at this point.
Yeah. Eric, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And I always say this, I want to have you back.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.